business. Standard Bank. It can be.
Very good afternoon to you. This is your Daytime Update. I'm Tami Ngubeni. Now, Stats SA has released the first quarter GDP growth numbers. The figures show annualized growth of 4.6% in the 3 months to March of 2021. It shows that finance, real estate and business services are being cited as the main contributors. But for a reaction on this, I'm joined now by Mr. Cas Coovadia, Business Unity of South Africa's CEO. Thank you for your time once again, Mr. Coovadia. Now, South Africa's GDP grew an annualized 4.6% in the first quarter of the year, beating many of the estimates that had been made. What do you make of these numbers?
Well, we have to welcome the GDP growth, annualized growth 4.6%, growth of 1.1% compared to the last quarter last year. We note the areas in which growth has occurred. You mentioned finance and trade. We've also looked at mining, where there's been significant growth. I think we also welcome the growth in household expenditure on household spending and changes in inventories. There's been increase in credit, particularly for mortgage finance and activity in the property market. All of that has got to be welcomed. But we must also note that the Statistician General has said that the economy is still below what it was in quarter one 2020. And in fact, it's the same size as it was in quarter one 2016. So essentially, we haven't grown in 5 years, and the trend is not a very good one. So what we need to do is we need to ensure that we continue to work together under the leadership of government, because I think a lot of this lies with government, to create an environment for investment and growth, to make it easier for businesses to actually open and work and prosper in this country, to improve our competitive rankings, to improve our ease of doing business rankings, to begin to implement issues we need to implement to address our energy crisis, to address our water crisis. And all of these things, there are some things government can do almost immediately to increase confidence, which in turn will increase investment and create more growth in a more sustainable way. So we welcome this, but we believe that there's a phenomenal amount of work to do. It is not comforting that our economy has not grown for 5 years.
And you mentioned a very good point there, that we are actually starting from a very low base, that this is equivalent to quarter one in 2016. So looking at it from that perspective really doesn't bode too well. But several stakeholders, and this includes multilateral institutions like the IMF and economists, have flagged South Africa's slow vaccine rollout as an impediment to growth. What do you think this will mean for GDP growth going forward?
Well, undoubtedly, the vaccine rollout is probably the single most critical thing we need to get right in this country. Business have been supporting government considerably for the last few months. We have mobilized capacity to actually administer vaccines. We've now administering about 80,000 odd a day as of yesterday. That has been significant growth from the time we started on the 17th of May. The problem we have at the moment is the supply of vaccines. We are only working with Pfizer vaccines at the moment because the FDA hasn't yet made a call on the J&J vaccines that they were investigating in the US. And as a result of that, as you know, J&J has decided not to release any of the vaccines globally. So until that is resolved, and until we get in more Pfizer vaccines that the government has contracted for, we won't make that significant an impact. But we believe that by middle of July, end of July, assuming J&J is released soon, we will have sufficient vaccines to actually utilize the capacity we have mobilized, and we could vaccinate as many as 150 to 170,000 people a day. Between the public and private sector, we believe we can do that, provided we have the vaccines. And so I think that we need to remain optimistic about this. We must encourage over 60s to register. We must encourage people to go for the vaccines, and we must encourage people to continue to meet all the health protocols of social distancing, sanitization, avoiding congregate settings, and so on, because we are now in the midst of the third wave. But I think that we have been working well together, certainly business and government and other social partners. And if we get those vaccines in, if J&J issue gets a result which is outside of our control, we believe we can actually ramp up to the numbers we need to ramp up to significantly make an impact on the virus.
Now, Mr. Coovadia, the business community has been calling for structural reforms which are critical to enable investment, to enable growth as well as inclusion. And you alluded to this a bit earlier on as well. What exactly are the changes that BUSA is calling for now?
Well, firstly, we just need to implement decisions that we've already taken. So in September last year, we had, together with social partners at NEDLAC, appealed to government to release the RFPs for the next tranche of renewables, to get the spectrum auction going, to make significant intervention in Durban Port to sort out efficiency and competitive issues there so that it becomes competitive, it is efficient. We saw during the week figures that said that our ports are, I think, 5th, 6th, or 7th most efficient in Africa. And to sort out issues related to issuing of mining exploration licenses, issuing of mining licenses. All of these we can do immediately. We can make it more efficient. We can reduce the time it takes to actually issue such licenses. The RFPs were finally released this year. Spectrum started to be auctioned, but it's now landed up in court, and there's a court action from some of the current users of spectrum who felt they weren't consulted on this matter at all. So we need to begin to implement urgently those things. We also need to implement issues related to energy. So, you know, the minister at DMRE has now allowed 10 megawatts of own generation. We have said, and we said so publicly, this needs to be increased to 50 megawatts. 10 megawatts would make some difference in some of the consumer industries, but would make no difference in industrial and manufacturing capacity. 50 megawatts would begin to make a difference, and we should be able to do that immediately. So there are some immediately implementable issues. And then I think we need an aligned government behind the president, so that government sends out one message. And that message is that we will do what we need to do to create an environment where investors feel confident that they can invest in our country, so that their property rights will be protected. They would be able to establish and run businesses properly. There won't be too many time lags between in actually issuing business licensing, and a range of other issues that we can address. That government will speak with one voice, not one government official or minister saying we will, and the president saying we will expropriate land in a way that does not have a negative impact on the economy, on food security, and then another minister saying, well, we're going to expropriate land because we want to expropriate land. So we need to get all of that right, and we need to understand that we are competing for investment. We are competing for investment with countries just to the north of us. There are countries in other parts of the continent that are getting it right and that are saying we are open for investment. We want the investment because we know without the investment we can't grow. And so it's those sorts of issues that need to be addressed.
Mr. Cas Coovadia, thank you very much for your insight.